All right, should we get down to business?
I think
Podcast
I'm ready.
time. 4 drinks, always.
Always. It's necessary.
Smoothie, coffee, and then electrolytes. It's just insane. Coffee's so good today.
Nice.
Okay, how do we do this? I forgot.
Welcome to Talking in Spirals, your favorite podcast. That's all I got today.
That's it? That's all you got? Okay.
That's all I got today.
Welcome back to Talking in Spirals, your favorite podcast's favorite podcast. Cancel me now.
We're a bit broken today. It's fine.
Good morning. I'm assuming it's morning because I listen to my podcast in the morning. So, welcome back to Talking in Spirals. This is actually episode 9 of season 2, meaning we have only one more episode of this season, which is absolutely crazy.
Crazy.
Before we go back to take a little break and come back even stronger and better than ever in season 3. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you to everybody who cares about listening to us rant into these mics. It's been a really amazing outlet for both of us. If you're new here, this podcast is about all things sustainability, slow living, questioning social media trends, consumption, etc. Honestly, we get into everything, a lot of things.
Today we're talking all about food waste, which I think both of us could probably have like a 4-hour podcast session talking about it. So we're going to try to limit it to like an hour.
Yeah, we have touched generally upon this topic in pretty much every single episode that we've done thus far, which is 19 episodes. So it kind of made sense to have one episode just entirely dedicated to this subject matter. So that's what this is.
But first, we should probably address the big elephant in the room and talk a little bit about the election.
Yeah, if you're listening to this, we have an election in just 1 week. So at the time of this episode's release, we will be about 4 days out from a presidential election. I don't know if you've heard anything about it.
I have severe anxiety.
Yeah, we're not doing well. Everyone is stressed, tensions are high. So today's episode is going to be kind of designed to take your mind off of that. We don't want to talk about it yet, but our next episode will be kind of post-election.
So it's a really good time to remind everybody that they should go and vote. And if you have any questions about where you should vote and find your polling place, go to vote.org. They have a ton of resources just about where your polling place is going to be. You can check your registration and see what's on your ballot. It's a little bit late, probably in most states, to register to vote. So hopefully you've hit that deadline. But if you have any questions about where to vote, now's the time to make your plan. So go to vote.org and make a plan.
Every state is different when it comes to early voting, but in some states, and you'll have to check for your particular state, but in some states, early voting will still be open at the time of this recording. So definitely triple check, make a plan. You might want to get it done early if you haven't already. But the most important thing is getting out to the polls and using your voice to advocate for people and planet. It is incredibly important. Every single election, we say, this is the most important election of our lifetime because the consequences get more and more dire every single year. So
Yeah.
we're not exaggerating when we say it is absolutely imperative that you get out and vote. And for everyone that is stressed about this election season, we are right there with you.
I saw something online yesterday that was talking about how if Donald Trump gets elected, then the 2 oldest justices are going to retire, and then they're going to put in, obviously, young Republican justices. And that's going to determine basically the state of our country for the next 50 years, which both of us are in our late 20s. So that's going to be the rest of our lives that these justices are going to determine our fate. So it's a very important election.
Yep, not terrifying at all. But we don't want to spread doom and gloom today. We want to spread positivity. We absolutely have the power to make a difference in this election cycle. So it's incredibly important that you get out, use your voice, do everything you can to advocate for people and planet this election season, but also just all of the time. So definitely keep that in mind. And we will see you guys and chat with you again after this election, which is daunting, but whatever happens, we will be here on these mics, yapping in a way that nobody asked for.
True. While we're talking about doom and gloom, Food waste stats in the United States are kind of scary. In the US, people waste 92 billion pounds of food annually. All right, now that we got doom and gloom out of the way, we can talk a little bit about our sponsor, Supercubes, who I am obviously a huge fan of. I've been using their products for every bit of 2 years. They are reusable silicone trays that I use to help reduce food waste and meal prep. They go into the freezer, you can bake in them, they go into the dishwasher. They're a very versatile kitchen tool, and I use them quite literally every day, if not every couple days.
I don't think we could have found a more fitting sponsor for this episode if we tried. It's honestly
True.
so aligned and perfect. Food waste reduction is something that we are both incredibly passionate about. If you have been living under a rock, then you might not know that, but we do talk about it almost every day on both of our individual platforms and this podcast, of course. And Supercubes does an amazing job of helping you to reduce food waste at the household level. I think there's a common misconception that food is mainly wasted outside the household, but there's actually quite a bit of food wasted at the household level that contributes to that very disturbing statistic that so much of our food is wasted. A lot of it is actually wasted at the household level. So, Supercubes is committed to helping people have healthier habits when it comes to reducing that waste in the form of freezing.
I use my 1 tablespoon cubes and my 1 cup cubes the most. I use 1 cups for, like, freezing leftover jars of sauce, freezing leftovers that we know we're not gonna eat the next day but could add into another meal. Tablespoons I use from everything from freezing leftover aquafaba from a chickpea can or lemon and lime juice from lemons and limes in the fridge that are going bad, so you can literally use them for anything.
Maria is a stan of Supercubes. Maria has been
Always.
using them for years. They are truly one of her tried and true daily use products. So if you're looking to reduce food waste in your house or get into meal prep, it doesn't even have to be about the waste. Meal prepping is so useful when you have this tool in your house. If you're interested in entering into that chapter, saving money, saving food, setting yourself up for success, making healthy meals ahead of time and popping them in your freezer for those busy days, then Supercubes is amazing. So, highly recommend you give them a try.
We have a link for you that you can buy them through. It will be linked in the episode description, and it's also in our link tree on our Instagram.
Thanks so much to Supercubes for sponsoring this very fitting episode about food waste reduction. So, let's get into the subject matter.
So now that we've talked all about supercubes, Brennan, what's your hyperfixation this week?
It's a great question. I would say that my hyperfixation right now is the resale of clothing, which
Ooh,
sounds kind of silly. In the beginning of October, my community puts on this event every year. It's kind of like a big flea market surf swap event. It's so fun. It's like our favorite community day of the year. And this year I really wanted to try my hand at secondhand clothing resale, like actually give it a go,
nice.
because those of you who know me know that it's something I'm really passionate about. I love shopping, buying secondhand. I make a lot of content about that. And I kind of have a knack for it. Like I'm really good at finding pieces when I thrift, diamonds in the rough, or, on online resale platforms. And I kind of just use it for myself. But the truth is that I don't need all those clothes and I don't need new clothes. And it's always good to clean out your closet. We talk about that a lot on this podcast. So I wanted to do like a curated resale day at this event. And my best friend and I did it. And we had a really awesome time. And we were able to donate some of the proceeds to the hurricane relief. And we had a really
Nice.
good time doing it. We really enjoyed it. And it was just like a really fun step into potentially something I could, do more of in the future. So I had a great time. So my hyperfixation is like reselling clothes, buying secondhand clothes, outside of thrifting, like the actual resale aspect of it. I thought it was really interesting. I have a lot of respect for people that curate and resell specifically like vintage. I think it's pretty interesting. It's like definitely a skill that a lot of people do not have. So yeah, I that's kind of where my head is at lately.
Nice. I definitely am in need of a closet clean out. I actually have it on my calendar to record after we record this episode. But I saw all your photos on Instagram and your stories, and it looks like you guys had a really good time there.
Yeah, it is like the best. My community is like the thing I'm probably the most grateful for in this life. So I feel very, very lucky. I didn't have such a strong community for many years of my life. And I am so thankful every single day to have people in my life that share life with me. It's pretty amazing. So that specific event is a day when everybody gets together. We just have like a blast, and it's just always so much fun. And it helps that a lot of them bought things from my closet. So now I get to see them wearing my clothes, and it's just so much more sustainable, of course, to always shop secondhand. And it's so special to see, like, if you're someone who cares about fashion like me, it's very cool to have pieces that have a story and get to see them on different people who are in different chapters of life. It's just really cool. So giving new life to pieces that you own, whether they're clothing or otherwise, it's always so much more sustainable and it's so much more sentimental. So that was a really cool experience. I think I might dive into more resale in the online space.
Nice.
Something to think about. Definitely going to be considering that.
I love that you donated some of the proceeds to the hurricane relief too.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the hurricanes, I just don't really have words for how devastating and disturbing the past couple of weeks have been for so many people all across this country, people that are close to me and people who I've never met in my life. It's horrifying. And I feel like we should speak on it. I also feel like there's not adequate words to express just how bad the situation with both storms has been. And I haven't really spoken as much as I should, probably because I felt like a little bit paralyzed by it. But um, I'm sure all of you know Hurricane Helene hit Asheville, North Carolina at the end of September, and it was absolute devastation. Asheville is still recovering. Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee are still recovering and will be for a very long time if they ever fully recover. That's my second home, and my mother lives there. And she got incredibly lucky. She's okay. The entire experience was like so incredibly traumatic for not just me, obviously. I was very lucky, but for so many people. So basically, not going to get too into it, but if you have the means and you have the ability to contribute to some of those relief funds, I highly recommend donating some money. If you have some extra money lying around, to the organization called Be Loved Asheville. They are an incredible organization. They have been boots on the ground helping in the community of Asheville for years and years and years. This is not new. I chose to donate some money to them specifically because I have seen them out in the streets in Asheville doing the work for Asheville's most vulnerable communities, like long before this storm. It was actually one of my first memories. I spent a large portion of the COVID lockdowns in Asheville, and they were out there helping people who were homeless, living in poverty, and they're doing an incredible job now. I'm really, really passionate about supporting their work, and Asheville is my second home. It's a very important community to me. So if anyone has any extra cash, any extra, any ability to contribute to them, that's something I would highly recommend because the people in North Carolina need your help. Also, the people in Florida need your help. I'm just biased towards Asheville specifically, and because it's my second home and it will always have a place in my heart. But it's just a very dark situation. Again, we want this episode to be positive and we're going to pivot. Don't worry, it's not going to be all doom and gloom. But if you have the ability to contribute, give back in any way to people who were affected by Hurricane Milton or Hurricane Helene, I know that those people would really appreciate it. So,
And it's going to take a
yeah.
lot of those southern states years to recover if they ever recover to what they were.
Yeah, the devastation really, it's really unprecedented. So, I want to stress that this is absolutely a result of climate change. So I don't know. I'm not going to get into it because I'm going to talk about it until I'm blue in the face. But yeah, if you listen to this podcast, you already know how I feel about this. It's devastating. I've been experiencing a lot of like climate grief as a result of this. And that's been an interesting experience. Just this feeling that you're never safe because my mom and a lot of other people moved to the mountains in North Carolina specifically to get away from storms like this because they thought it would be safe. So it's just been a lot to process. It's been heavy and terrifying, but I will say it's very heartening to see how people have come together and lifted that community up. I've never seen a community in my life that has more resilience and more of like a community spirit. It's not individualistic at all. Everyone comes together. It's always been that way in Asheville, and that's a good thing because they need it now more than ever. So it's been very heartening to see those communities come together and helping each other out. It's pretty beautiful. So I will not ramble on about this anymore, but yeah, it's been heavy. If you have all sorts of feelings, just know that you're not alone. That's pretty much it. It's a lot and we're all dealing with it and processing it, and yeah, that's all I'm going to say. So now we have to pivot from that really heavy commentary on climate change induced storms into Maria's hyperfixation, which is silly and fun.
That's such an us thing though. It's just like talking for
Right?
20 minutes doom and gloom and then switching to something like apples.
Oh, that's your hyperfixation, apples. That's
Apples
so
are my
fun.
hyperfixation. We went apple picking 2 weeks ago, and I got 100 pounds of apples, which filled an entire wheelbarrow for $65 at our local apple orchard, which was a super great deal. I went in for 40 pounds of apples, so I had enough apples for all of my recipes, and was a terrible judge at how many apples was actually 40 pounds. So we ended up with 100 pounds, but it's fine.
So what have you been using them for?
I have been working my way through them. So, apples, speaking of food waste, apples are good on the counter for anywhere from 5 to like 7 days, freshly picked apples. And they are good in the fridge for 2 to 3 months. I spent about 5 days trying to use up as many apples that I could that wouldn't fit into the fridge. So, right now we have a full drawer of apples, and then the entire right side of the main portion of our fridge was filled with apples that were just like stacked on top of each other. And every time you'd open the door, there was a good chance that they would come crashing down on you. It happened a couple times. But I spent 4 days just trying to use up as many apples as I could that didn't fit in the fridge. So I started by making caramel apple pie filling and canning it. And
My
then
God.
it is so good. And then I used the scraps, so the cores and the peels from making caramel apple pie filling to make apple juice. And then oh no, I used the cores and the scraps from those apples to make apple cider vinegar, which is still brewing on my countertop. And
We
then
love homemade apple cider vinegar. I have done that so many times and it never gets old.
I have never been able to do it and not have it mold, but so far so good. I have fermentation weights on them this time, so I think that
I was
has
about
helped a
to say
lot.
that is the key. That's exactly how
Yeah.
I've had success in the past. It's with those weights. That's
Yeah,
the only
so
way, I think.
I've been doing that, so my apple cider vinegar is brewing on the countertop. And then I used another 16 pounds of apples, I think, to make apple butter and can that up, which is so good. And I use the peels and the cores from apple butter to make apple juice. And then I turned 8 cups of that apple juice into apple jelly, scrappy apple jelly.
How many jars do you have in your house right now?
Probably every bit of 200.
Well, I'm excited personally for the content coming our way. All of the Apple content that I know will come our way. If you guys are
It's
not already
happening.
following Maria, I have spoken about this for years at this point. Maria is my favorite content creator. And obviously, she's like my business partner and my friend and my podcast co host and all of the things. But like, apart from that, she's just so good. Like,
You're so
we can
kind.
always count on Maria to put out quality content, quality and quantity. So I love to watch her stuff. She inspires me to get my life together. Sometimes I watch it and I'm like, I don't know how she does this, but I can't wait to see the Apple content. I'm excited. We know she's going to deliver every time.
I have so much apple content coming. Then I also made applesauce. I made cinnamon applesauce and plain applesauce. And then from those scraps, I made more apple juice, but I canned that apple juice.
Hell yeah. I've been waiting to hear if you made what I made with a bunch of apples yesterday. I
What did
made
you
apple
make?
cider.
Oh, I thought about doing apple cider, but I have not. I
I
don't have
just
any
had a
sweet
ton
apples
of
left.
apples. I had a ton of apples from just from a BOGO sale in
Nice.
my fridge, and I didn't really like the way they tasted eating wise. I'm a bit of an apple snob, I guess. I do eat a ton of apples, like a ton. If you used to work in my former job in the office that I worked at, you would know I ate a green apple with peanut butter every single day. And every single time I ate it at my desk, everybody would come and ask me if they could have a bite. And so I was very well known for that. But I really love like Honey Crisp. I'm really into like nice apples right now. So I bought these really small kind of BOGO apples, and I had way too many and I just wasn't eating them. So I decided to try and make a simmer pot apple cider situation, and it came out really good. So highly
Nice.
recommend. I obviously will have that video coming soon as well. It's probably up at the time of you listening to this.
I can't wait to see it. I've always wanted to try apple cider, but I just didn't get to it this year. And so I have a
Well, you have
drawer full of
plenty of
apples
apples.
still, but they're all
Yeah, you can
tart
get to it.
apples.
Honestly, I will say I think this one came out too sweet, if anything.
Really?
So yeah, because I know I've seen some recipes where they simmer the apples. It's usually just apples, water. They do add some sugar. I wish I'd added about half the sugar that this recipe called for because the apples were already so sweet. They were just like a red, I can't even remember what they were. They're like a small red apple. But they were already so sweet. And I prefer things a little bit more tart. That's kind of
Nice.
my general taste preference. So I know some recipes will add some oranges or other citrus in, and I didn't do that. So it was a little sweet for my liking. So I don't know, maybe do half sweet apples, half tart. Might be good.
So I'm gonna have to try. I
Nice.
I my husband's been eating the drawer apples because they're really tart and he really likes tart apples, but I don't know what I'm gonna do
Yeah.
with the rest of the apples. So that would be a good use of.
Yeah. I feel like you could make a bunch of apple pies and freeze them for Thanksgiving.
So I did the apple pie filling that's canned on my shelf.
Yeah.
So then
Okay.
I'm trying really hard to use the freezer less because we always have a lot of power outages because of snowstorms. So
Oh, yeah.
one of
She's in
these
her canning
times
era.
one of these times I know that our power is going to go out and we're going to lose everything in our fridge and freezer. So I'm worried
Well,
about
having just been
like.
hit by a hurricane, I definitely agree with that. So,
Yeah, so that's my main reason why I really got into canning, just so I could try to preserve some of this food to be more shelf stable. That way, if we do lose our power and we don't have a backup generator or anything, so it's more of a we lose our power, we shouldn't open the fridge or freezer for um,
yeah,
that time. So,
that's a good rule of thumb. Have some shelf stable stuff. I'm not into canning at this point in my life, but I always, as a Floridian, always have canned beans, canned vegetables, and things, shelf stable foods, because you never know when you're going to lose power. So,
yeah,
yeah. And that's a good segue. I don't know if it's a good segue, actually. We were like, vote, here's our sponsor, hurricanes, and then clothing resale, and then apples. It was really intense and all over the place. But I think we made it to the end destination, which is food preservation and food waste reduction. That's the subject matter that we will be discussing from this point forward. No more tangents. That's a
no
bold
more
faced lie.
sad and depressing
That's
stuff.
a bold faced lie. We will absolutely be going off topic. This podcast is called Talking in Spirals. So, in case you didn't know, approximately 40% of the food produced in the US is wasted. I'm seeing 108 billion pounds of food waste each year.
I just pulled up the Feeding America stat earlier in this episode and said that people waste 92 billion. So that's still a ton, no matter which one you choose.
It's both bad. If it's 108 billion, that's even more disturbing.
So it's between 30 and 40% of the US food supply, which is insane.
Yeah, absolutely insane and obviously not sustainable in any way. Not sustainable environmentally, not sustainable monetarily, not sustainable in terms of all of the people in this country who are in desperate need of food and are experiencing hunger.
And that's like going grocery shopping and literally just throwing away 40% of what you buy. I don't know about you, but groceries are expensive.
I think there are a lot of people who waste food and don't realize that they don't have to. Do you know what I mean? I think there are a lot of people who grew up in households where it was just normalized that half of the food they bought at the grocery store would just go in the garbage at the end of the week. Um, and I want to challenge that. That's not normal. That doesn't need to be normalized. That's an incredible waste of resources and also money for your family, especially in a time when people are constantly talking about the cost of living is incredibly high, the cost of groceries is incredibly high. The idea that households are already struggling to stay ahead and then we're just tossing food in the garbage is absolutely insane. So, it doesn't have to be that way. It shouldn't be that way. We need to culturally shift and think of our food as having a cost in every regard. There's a monetary cost, of course. There's a resource cost, of course. So water, etc., things that are resources that are used to produce that food item. And then, of course, there's also a labor cost. So people are working hard to grow and produce the food that you eat. And it's not fair to everyone involved for that food to just ultimately end up in the garbage, especially, as I said, when so many people are hungry.
And I know that the stats that we opened up about were just about the United States, but this is a problem across the entire world. Roughly a third of the world's food is wasted, which ends up being about 1.3 billion tons a year. So, food is lost in every step of the food cycle from production to handling to processing, distribution, end of life. It is lost in all different spots, and it's not just a United States problem. So if you are outside of the United States listening to this podcast, this also applies to you.
Right. And additionally, wasted food is actually the largest component of material in the landfills here in the US. So that's something to think about. Think about our landfills. The largest component that makes up the trash in those landfills is actually wasted food. And needlessly wasted, right? Like we don't have to be throwing away food and we shouldn't be. And there are a lot of things that we can do to reduce that. Of course, that food that is in that landfill is creating methane emissions and greenhouse gases that accelerate climate change. So, this goes pretty deep. I like to keep it surface level for people who are new to this topic. So, when I create content about food waste, I tend to focus more on the surface level aspects of it, like you're throwing away money because I think that can appeal to every single person to reduce the money they're throwing
Mhm.
away, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on. That's something universal. Nobody likes to be throwing away money, especially in this economy with our inflation that we're experiencing. I tend to focus more on that aspect when I'm talking to somebody who is a complete beginner in this field who's never really thought about it, because that's an easy way to get people on board with reducing food waste. And it's valid. I don't want to be throwing away money either. But of course, the greenhouse gas emissions are a huge problem that's associated with that. And we need to push back against that. And we need to reduce our food waste for that reason, ultimately, in addition to the money thing. Also, around 20% of the US fresh water supply and 18% of the nation's cropland are used to produce food that goes to waste. So it's a massive waste of natural resources. And in terms of hunger, like we were talking about earlier, I read that 35 million Americans struggle with food insecurity. And that includes approximately 11 million American children who are unsure of where their next meal is going to come from and suffer from hunger. So, in America, right? First world country, supposedly. So that really highlights the disparity between the excess and the need. We have 40% of our food supply going to waste while 35 million Americans are experiencing hunger. That's unacceptable to me. And while I do believe that our government and the corporations that produce our food ultimately do hold a huge responsibility in reducing the amount of food that goes to waste in this country, there is also individual responsibility. I do think that we as individuals have a responsibility to reduce food waste at the household level. I think it's very important, and this will come into play throughout all of our conversations about sustainability. Yes, we need large scale systemic change. We also need individual action. It's not either or, it's both.
And I always hear people saying, "Oh, well, the food decomposes in landfills." While that is kind of correct, it does decompose, but it doesn't decompose with enough oxygen, so it creates these greenhouse gases. And this is something that I hear all the time that from climate deniers that it's not harmful. It is. It is definitely harmful. And what shocks me is that things like a head of lettuce can take 25 years to decompose in a landfill because it's not the proper conditions for food to compost. So, push back against anybody who says that it's going to decompose in a landfill, which is something that I did not know until I was in my 20s that it doesn't.
I didn't know that. Yeah, no. I if you think about food sitting in a plastic bag sealed under hundreds and thousands of pounds of other trash, it's not the proper conditions
Mhm.
for it to break down.
It's just not something we were taught. Like, I wish we were taught that in high school when you do the environmental chapter of biology. I'm sure now they teach it, but it was something that I didn't learn until I was in my 20s. So the thought that it wouldn't break down properly in a landfill was not, it did not make sense in my brain.
And that's why environmental education is the way that we're doing it and the way that so many other people are doing it online is actually really important because there's a lot of things that people didn't learn. I don't think people understand that throwing food in the garbage can have such a large impact, especially in the United States where we're not required to separate our trash, in every area. People are not aware of the negative impacts that throwing that banana peel even into a trash can have. So it's not something that we want to shame anybody for doing because the education just isn't there.
Mhm.
But systemic change can be made. So, what are some ways that we can help?
I go in with a list to the grocery store every single week. It takes about a half hour just to look in my pantry and my fridge and figure out what we actually need and plan some meals. And that has significantly reduced the amount of stuff that we buy, which then reduces the amount of waste that we have. So we're not just randomly picking up stuff in the grocery store because it's not on the list. And I also don't grocery shop hungry. That's huge.
That is huge because I will buy up the entire store. I think there's like a set of steps that can help reduce food waste at the household level. And like Maria said, it starts with planning your meals and shopping smart. So, going into the grocery store with a clear knowledge and clear understanding of what we actually need. So, for me, and for you, that means planning around what we already have in our house. So if I have a big box of lettuce that's going to go bad in the next couple of days, I'm going to come up with some recipes or some meal plans that prioritize using that lettuce. And if I need to shop to fill in the gaps, then that's what I do. And I need to stress to people in this day and age, it has never been easier to shop smart at the grocery store. Shameless self promo, I make budget meal plans. Like, this is something I do for work. I offer them on my website for free. You can check them out. I have three, all different budgets, all different dietary restrictions, etc. But in this day and age, you can use AI, you can use programs like ChatGPT to literally type in, here's everything I have in my fridge, what can I make with this to get me through the rest of the week? And what do I need to buy in what denomination to fill in the gaps and create recipes? And I think that people are honestly not aware that those resources can be so useful for so many things. I know people hate AI, but I use ChatGPT all the time to help me with meal planning and food waste. I think it's so useful. I don't think enough people are doing it. So there's also apps. If you don't want to use ChatGPT, there's apps that are literally designed for this purpose. I personally don't use any of them because this is like what I do for work. So I can't recommend one in particular, but there are so many. So when it comes down to shopping around what you already have and shopping to reduce food waste, there are more tools now than ever. And that will ultimately save you money. So that's something to keep in mind.
I love
So
your meal
yeah,
plans. Where can people find them?
thank you. They're just on my website. There's a little page that says offers and freebies, and they're right there. I have a $100 budget meal plan, which is $100 worth of groceries from Trader Joe's. And that meal plan is enough food for two people, meals, snacks, desserts, etc., for less than $100 for a week. And then I have one for $70, which is also Trader Joe's, so a lower budget. And then I have one for $55 for a single person household.
So impressive.
And I'm going to keep making more because I think they're really useful. I think they're really helpful. So,
They
yeah,
are.
and you don't need to, they're free, so you could get them free, but if you don't want to support mine, that's fine. I do not care. Just stop wasting food, and there's so many resources out there. So highly recommend the Chat GPT thing. That has saved my ass so many times. So yeah. Just type into ChatGPT, here's what I have in my fridge. Here's how many days I need to make food for. Here's my grocery budget to fill in the gaps. And it literally answers everything for you. So there's really no excuse for feeling overwhelmed by it. You know what I mean? Like these tools exist and we might as well use them to benefit ourselves and the planet. So yeah,
One
that's
more
my
thing
2 cents.
fangirling about your meal plans, though, because I also love that you go in each meal plan in depth and share the videos on your page about how to make them. So it's like an interactive way to plan your meals.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Maria does a ton of homemade kitchen restocks and everything too, learning how to cook from scratch, which ultimately saves money and it reduces waste. We create content about this all the time, both of us. So, this is clearly something we have strong feelings on and we have the content to back it up. So, yeah, check out both our websites, both our pages. Shopping smart is everything. When you store your food, I also think using like the first in, first out method is really
Absolutely.
helpful. So, you can label things or I like to just put the older thing in front of the newer thing. So I've seen a lot of people, I've never done this, but I honestly should. They'll have a bin in their fridge that says eat first.
Mhm.
Like if you have ADHD or you struggle with object permanence, such as myself, things that are in the back of the fridge, if you can't see them, they're not going to get eaten. So highly recommend like putting this stuff, maybe try that bin method of eat me first, and I think it's just kind of a good way to visually see that there's things that need to be eaten and then you don't have to think so much. I know a lot of you are busy, you work full-time jobs, you might have kids, you have a lot going on in your day-to-day. It's really helpful to just have the thinking done for you. Like this is going to go bad, so we are eating this today. Do you know what I mean? I don't know.
Absolutely. And another side tip for the first in, first out, if you have somebody in your household that tends to open the new thing before what's already opened. Like take sour cream for example. You have a half container and a full container that you just bought. Put the full container all the way in the back of the fridge out of sight until the half container is used.
That sounds like shade to your husband.
I'm not naming names.
She said, I will not confirm or deny that my husband is a waster of food.
It-
So, yeah, organize your fridge in a way that helps you reduce food waste. So, that's going to be dependent on you as a person and your individual preferences. But for me, it is like putting the old stuff in the front. And then, of course, just cook it. Do you know what I mean? If you have a bag of broccoli that is sitting in there that's like, okay, this is gonna go bad, like literally just throw it in the oven. And then when you're put it back in the fridge, you've cooked broccoli, and then it's like, okay, in a couple hours or maybe the next day, you're making food, throw the broccoli on your plate. Is
Mhm.
that silly? It's like you have it ready to go in the fridge. I think that's a completely different kind of aspect here. Prepping your food so that it actually gets used. So, like, if I buy a bunch of veggies to dip in hummus or some other dip, when I get home, I cut them up and put them into a container ready to eat so that way I can literally grab them. I'm much more likely to use things up when it's ready to eat and it doesn't
Yeah.
require, like, you know what I mean? Like if I buy a whole watermelon, sometimes I'll want the watermelon, but the idea of like going in and making the giant mess that is cutting a watermelon, it's just like not appealing to me. So sometimes it will
Yep.
sit there for a long time. Thankfully, watermelon doesn't takes a long time to go bad in the fridge, but you know what I mean? Like that's just one example. Like if I have carrots or celery, I store them in water. I mean, we could go into so many tips with like how to store produce to last a long
Yeah.
time.
We've made a ton
There's
of content on
Yeah,
storing
we have
produce on both
both
of our
made
pages.
yeah, we have both made so much content on that subject. So, highly recommend checking that out. But if you have any specific questions for how to best store produce so that it doesn't go bad, definitely check out some videos that we have made previously that I think are pretty useful on that topic. But honestly, knowing yourself is big. So, like, if you go out on the weekends and you mostly eat out all weekend, don't go grocery shopping for produce on a Friday. Does that make
True.
sense? Just be
Absolutely.
honest with yourself. Like, I know a lot of people will buy all of this like beautiful produce thinking I'm in my health era, like I'm going to cook all this week and just eat healthy. And then they're not being realistic and they're not going to do it and it's going to go to waste. That's not good. Like, that's not a good way to live.
Yeah.
So, highly, highly recommend being honest with yourself about what you will and won't use. And if you think that fresh produce is an issue for you, it is totally fine to buy frozen vegetables.
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
always have frozen broccoli in my freezer,
We do
always.
too.
Like, that's a rule for me because I know I can always throw a meal together and throw in the frozen broccoli. Like, it is a staple in my house. So, buying frozen vegetables is fine. There's nothing wrong with frozen vegetables. They're a super cheap, super economical way to get your veggies in, and you don't have to worry about the shelf life. So, frozen food, that's a good segue into freezing because if you know us, you know we love freezing food.
And so just a little disclaimer, we are not holier than thou. We are not perfect at making sure that there's no food wasted. We sometimes grocery shop on a Friday and then realize that we're not going to be home much on the weekend. We sometimes have food that goes bad. We are not
I
perfect at
literally
this.
composted an entire container of lettuce last night.
Perfect
Do did
example.
I hate that? Yes, I hated it. Did I feel more guilt about it than the average American? Yes, but it did happen. So, yeah, no, we're not like perfect by any means.
So it's very important to remember that we are not perfect and we waste food sometimes, and that's okay. But one of the main ways that we try to reduce food waste is using our freezer. I don't know about you, but I have so much stuff that would have gone to waste in the freezer. Just last week, I had some wrinkly red bell peppers that were several days past their prime. They were so wrinkly, so I chopped them up and just diced them and put them in a freezer bag. And the next time we have stir fry or we do quesadillas, we can toss them right out of the freezer, right into a pan. And then we're saving money because we no longer need to have it buy a new red pepper to make quesadillas. The freezer
Perfect.
is
It's a
amazing.
great Yeah, and if you have a little roll of tape, I used to work in restaurants and kitchens. I label things with tape if I think I'm going to forget about it. Just keep a little roll of tape and a Sharpie in your kitchen, and you can throw a little label on the things that go into your freezer. You don't need like fancy gear for your freezer, but it does help to have things that you know work for you. So if you don't want to get the super cubes, we love the super cubes, but the stasher bags are great. Like anything silicone, anything reusable, it's really great to throw things in the freezer in reusable
Super Cubes
containers that are,
also has fancy tape.
yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. I
They
didn't
now
know
also
that.
have fancy blue tape to label things.
Okay, that's awesome. In terms of shelf stable things, as I said with the frozen vegetables, like I am very much pro buying things that don't go bad. And
Mhm.
I know that there's a bit of stigma with that, people thinking that you need to eat everything fresh in order to be healthy. Um, there is absolutely nothing wrong with buying dried things, buying canned things, buying frozen things. That's generally a lot more environmentally friendly if it means you're not going to be throwing it away. And it also saves you a lot of money. So I am a big fan of shelf stable stuff. Sometimes I'll make an entire dinner from just pantry staples. It's super easy. You can throw rice on to cook and then, heat up some beans, a can of tomatoes, some corn. That's like a delicious burrito bowl right there.
That's a
And it
staple in
doesn't
our house.
percent. I don't want to go grocery shopping and there's always something in this house. If you
Yes.
prioritize always having cans of beans, I cannot imagine my house without cans of beans. I
Same.
cannot imagine it. Like the fact that there are people who don't eat from cans, like I've heard that before, like, oh, I don't eat from cans. That's
If you
insane to
feel
me.
that way, then you should take up canning and can your own homegrown or farm fresh food from a local farm and can it yourself.
Also, I'm sorry, but that's elitist. That's elitist as hell. To say that you don't want to eat canned vegetables or
Yeah.
canned beans or something, that's elitist. We're done. That's it. Sorry. I have
I
strong
under
opinions.
I kind of understand.
I get where they're coming from. I'm just saying, like, in a world where food is not a given for everyone, having access to like nutritious food is not a given.
Yeah.
Like, food deserts exist in this country. Hunger is a problem in this country. The idea that you would think, oh, you're not healthy if you don't eat everything fresh and organic, like that really bothers me. That's just
Yeah.
me.
I okay. To be devil's advocate and play devil's advocate, this is something I learned a month ago from another creator that I follow. The FDA does allow some bugs in canned food as long as the levels are within certain limits. And once I learned that, like, I cannot look at store canned food the same way. And I don't even really want to share any of those stats about what's allowed and what canned goods because nobody else needs to know that. But to play devil's advocate, I understand if people don't feel that canned food from the grocery store is safe, but then there's other options. Buy fresh
Yeah,
food,
there's other options.
freeze your fresh food,
Yeah,
home can your fresh
right.
food. So
Grow your own food.
grow your own food.
I mean, it's just a matter of like, I'm just speaking to like people who think this is too inaccessible. It's like it's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't have to be, you know? If you want to go all out and make everything from scratch, I mean, you guys see our content. You know that we both do a lot of that. So, we're not knocking anybody who wants to do that. It's just a matter of like that is not accessible for the vast majority of people. The vast majority of Americans, from my understanding, are quite literally just trying to get by. So, we want to make it equitable for everybody to have healthy food, and reducing food waste by using shelf stable or frozen food is a really good way of doing that. So that's my 2 cents. We got off topic again.
One of my other favorite ways to reduce food waste is using a dehydrator, and you don't even actually need a dehydrator. You can use your oven. So, for example, I had bought mushrooms last month that were on a sale. They were huge packs of like family packs of mushrooms. They were going to go bad like that day, next day. They were already discounted at the store because they were trying to get rid of them. So I used my dehydrator and then ground them into a mushroom powder to use for like cream of mushroom soup or something like that. So I used a dehydrator, but several times I usually just pop stuff on a sheet pan and then put my oven at the lowest temperature. I think it goes down to like 175, 180, something like that Fahrenheit. And then I can dehydrate food and it makes it shelf stable for anywhere from 1 to 3 years depending on what you're dehydrating. So, if you don't like canning, you don't like freezing, try dehydrating. It's really easy. You don't even need a dehydrator. You can get a dehydrator, but you can also just use your oven.
Yeah, that's true. I've done a bunch of videos about dehydrating fruit specifically and like
Yeah,
making those fruit leathers,
your mango.
dehydrating it. Yeah, yeah, right. That's a really awesome way to make, a natural ingredient into like a fun little snack. And honestly, I think like the secret to all of this is just get creative and have fun with it. I think that's really important. So have a good time, enjoy what you're doing and like make it fun. And I've said this for people that tell me they don't like cooking or they don't like, they're not interested in any of this stuff. Turn on a podcast and get moving. You know what I mean? Turn on a
Mhm.
song you like or a podcast or a show you like and give yourself some designated time to kind of either meal prep or put your produce away in a way that will keep it from going bad. Like set aside the time and make it into an activity that you actually enjoy. And have fun with it. If that means like for me, if I have a bunch of bananas that are going to go bad, sometimes, yeah, a lot of the time I'll just throw them in the freezer because I use them for smoothies every day.
Mhm.
But I also will say, hey, I have all these bananas. Like, let's make a loaf of banana bread because why not? I'm either just going to stare at my screens or I could take the time to actually do something with my hands and get creative and make something delicious. Just throw it into Google, like quick banana bread recipe. And you can usually do everything in like less than an hour.
And I was also going to say that you can use Google, but you should also I hate that I'm recommending this, but recently, if I have something that I'm not sure what I should do with, it's going bad, I will type it into TikTok and type in preserving blank, whatever it is. So preserving bananas. And then a bunch of videos will come up with different recipes, or you can type in banana recipes. And I've been using TikTok as a video resource. I find that it's given me a lot of inspiration.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. It's supposed to be fun. I think making anything fun is the secret to everything climate related. I think that is a really powerful way of taking the doom and gloom that is the world of climate and turning it into a fun, wholesome activity. That is the way to do it. So that applies to the food waste thing as well.
My life goal is also to get a freeze dryer. So if you haven't heard of freeze drying, it preserves 99% of the nutrients, whereas dehydrating, I believe, is like 97% of the nutrients. So it preserves a little bit more of the nutrients. But then the food is also shelf stable for 25 years, which is insane. Dehydrated goods last 3 years, things last in the freezer for about a year. Canning is anywhere from 5 to 10 years, but freeze drying is 25 years. The only problem with freeze drying is that the gear is really expensive. So it's kind of like on my wish list of things to do. You can buy a freeze dryer for about for between $2,000 and $3,000. You can also spend a little bit more. They
Oh
are
my God.
so expensive, but it's one of those things that it makes your food last even longer. So I don't have a freeze dryer. I would like to one day. We'll get there someday.
That's on the food waste wish list, but it's not
Yes.
exactly accessible for the average
No.
person.
No, and I think there's only one brand making them right now called Harvest Right. I haven't seen any
One
other brands
brand?
doing it.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
shocking to me. I do love freeze dried fruit. Love.
me too. I buy it from Aldi a lot.
Me too. It's so good. The Trader
Mhm.
Joe's freeze dried strawberries are my weakness.
I feel like if I had a freeze dryer, I would use it all the time, but I just can't justify spending a couple
No,
thousand
that's
dollars on something
insane.
right now.
I thought you were going to say like 800.
No, if it was 800, I would have one already.
Really?
But
You're dedicated.
yeah. Yeah, and we have our now that our basement's refinished, we would have the space for it.
Now that you have your post apocalyptic bunker situation
My nice big
with all
canning
your,
rack.
yeah, with all your canning and everything. We've spoken a lot about canning in the past. In I think it was the last episode, maybe 2 episodes ago, we spoke about Maria's canning obsession.
My always
And
hyperfixation, always.
yeah, so And that comes back to like having fun. She's turned it into a hobby. I don't know. I have nothing but good things to say about practical hobbies.
Mhm.
Like
Me too.
having, you know, feeding yourself and your family and then making it fun and interesting and exciting for you. That's just like, wow, respect. Amazing. So, if you do end up wasting food, let's talk about composting.
I love composting. I have worms that eat all of my food waste.
Yeah, Maria is a diehard composter. I, as a renter, am not in a place to have a full composting setup. I've thought about it a lot. I've done a lot of wishing and hoping that it would be more feasible for me, but it's currently not. So I have a composting machine, which is, I know, it's not as sustainable as it can be, obviously. But for right now, the phase of life that I'm in, it is my best option and it's better than the food going into the garbage. But that being said, I will hand it over to Maria to talk about composting because she is really taking it very seriously. I have a ton of respect for how much work she's done. Um, to prioritize reducing food waste via composting. So, what's your composting setup? And can you tell people like what composting really is and what it does to reduce food waste in case someone's not aware?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started composting the same way that Brennan does now using an electronic composter. And I used that until I could really get a setup going. Composting is breaking down any sort of organic material into a nutrient rich soil. And so I garden a lot. So I use my compost in my garden. And I currently have the setup of having worms. I have 1,000 red wiggler worms in a little box called the sub pod.
1,000.
There's probably more now because they reproduce and obviously the natural life cycle, some of them die. But I have a sub pod and a little balcony garden planter, and they're all closed up for
Is
the winter.
Subpod still a company?
It got bought out, and I think they're re-releasing, like they're reopening soon. So stay tuned. I'll let you know when they're back open, and you can have your own sub pod. But you can also do the
Wait, I'm
same.
looking on their website because I just want to make sure. It looks like you can shop Subpod right now.
Really, they're back up again? Amazing. It says sub pod products will be available for pre-order soon. So sub pod is relaunching soon.
It says we'll ship the first week of November.
Oh my god, that's so exciting. So they
So
are
yeah, we should say they're available. Yeah.
so sub pods are available again. They were gone for a few months as the business was going through some restructuring and they were bought out. But I use a sub pod. It's basically just in a giant garden planter. You can achieve the same thing by getting a box and drilling holes in the side for the worms to crawl in and out of and burying it in your garden or in the ground. But I'm a big fan of sub pod. I've been using it for 6 months. My worms are very
So
happy.
basically it's like a compost bin that's half in, half out of the ground or the dirt.
Yes, it's like
And it's just a
mostly in.
system that allows you to break down food waste more effectively. And it's a lot easier and more accessible. But just for the record, you can compost at home with like very little supplies. I grew up in a composting household and my dad just had a big pile in the yard. He put some like cinder blocks around it. Like this was like a free operation. We would put our food scraps out there and he would turn the compost with a shovel. You can do it, without much gear at all. They also have the composters that you turn and they kind of like move the food around and make sure that it's breaking down. You can use worms. You don't have to use worms. There's so much that goes into composting. It's one of the most sustainable things that you can do in your household is implementing a compost setup. So, highly recommend, and I'm a hypocrite because I'm not able to do it right now. And it's okay if you're not able to. There's also cities that pick up compost. If you're lucky enough to live in a city that will do composting pickup, that's incredible. Highly recommend looking into that. If your city does not offer that to you, there are companies that will do composting pickup and they'll come and get
Mhm.
it from your house. There's also companies where you can drop it off. Like when I lived in Miami, my zero waste store had a composting drop off. You just put like $1 into this little bin and you dropped off your compost at the back door. And then There's, botanical gardens, city gardens that you can drop off your compost. There's just a lot of options. If you're living in an apartment and it's not something that's accessible for you, it is one of the most sustainable things you can do. I have nothing but good things to say about composting. So definitely do some research and see if it's something that you can implement into your life, maybe in a traditional way, maybe in an untraditional way. There's just always things we can do to be a little bit more eco friendly.
There are so many options for composting. I'm a little biased because I like my worm pets, but they're about to be closed up for the winter. Usually they eat between like 4 and 5 cups of food waste a week for me during the summer, but now that it's the winter, it'll be like 1 cup a week, if that,
Do they
just because
die?
they know they live because I have a greenhouse cover for the sub pod that keeps the temperatures warmer.
Yeah.
So, but this is gonna be my
Well,
first
that's,
winter, so we'll see if they survive the buffalo temperatures. I hope they do.
yeah, it's pretty amazing. I'm excited to see if any of you guys take on composting.
And let us know if you do.
Yeah, please do. Basically, there's a couple steps that you can take to reduce food waste at the household level. Number one, plan your meals and shop smart. And like I said, you can use AI programs like ChatGPT or meal planning apps, grocery planning apps to help with that.
Don't grocery shop hungry.
That's a big one. Number two is proper storage. So keep food correctly to extend its shelf life. Number three is the FIFO method. So storing it in a way that you will use the older stuff first. So for some of you, that might mean having a little bin in your fridge that says, eat this first. And then four, I would say my notes here, I wrote, get creative with leftovers. So, eating leftovers, the fact that there's people that don't eat leftovers blows my mind. Leftovers are amazing.
Agreed.
Oh, and then number five, I wrote understand expiration dates. So
Yeah,
we should touch on that. Learn the difference between best by, sell by, and use by dates. Most foods are still safe to eat past the sell by date, the best by date, especially if they look and smell fine. I know people are really creeped out by that, but we really need to understand that, like, there is a lot of the time food that is perfectly good that we can still continue eating past a sell by date.
and use your best judgment too. I mean, if it smells funky, throw it in the
Come on, if
compost when
something
in
is
doubt.
molded, yeah, like, let's be real. If something is covered in mold, just stay on the safe side. But if something looks completely fine, you're probably fine.
And if you
Don't come
notice
for
it
me.
is the sell by, best by, use by date, and it's on that date or 1 or 2 days after, pop it in the freezer if you know you're not gonna use it.
Yeah, great idea. So, number six is compost food scraps. We just went to hell and back discussing that. Number seven, preserve excess food. So, we talked about freezing, canning, pickling is a good one, fermenting, and then also drying, which we discussed, like the dehydrating. I'm a big fan of fermentation and pickling, especially with vegetables. I'm a huge fan of doing like a lacto ferment on hard vegetables like carrots, celery, etc. I love a lacto ferment.
Nice.
It is so easy and I have tons of videos about it. Fermentation is not that difficult. I promise it is accessible. All you have to do is make a saltwater brine. That's it. So anyone can do it. And then number eight, I put donate food. If you have food that's going to go bad and you know you're not going to get to it and you have someone in your life that will eat it, give it to them.
True.
Do you know what I mean? Like, give
Yeah.
it to them. Like, if you have a neighbor and you are close with that neighbor, which I hope you are, because I think that's something that's missing from our society these days, go knock on their door and say, hey, would you eat this? Because I have too much and it's going to go bad. Or drop it off at a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter or something of the sort, if that's within your realm of possibility. I think that's huge. Sometimes I'll make recipes, I'll test recipes, and it ends up making way too much food, I will
Mhm.
literally have people come over and take it or eat with me. Do you know what I mean? I'll
Yeah.
say, hey, you guys want to come over for dinner? Because I just made 3 batches of chili to test this recipe. Obviously, that's specific to our job, but, share with people, share resources, right? Share the food, especially if you know somebody that might be in more of a need.
Mhm.
And then I would say cook in portion. We've talked about this so much, Maria and I both like to make double batches of things and freeze half and then eat it for a couple of days. So that's really nice. And then I put also be mindful of food waste in restaurants. So
Yeah, bring
leftovers
your own
for
containers
me,
for leftovers.
if you can remember to bring your own containers, that's amazing. If you have to use a container from the restaurant, that's fine. You're not a bad environmentalist. Food waste is a massive problem. So if you can eat a meal at a restaurant and then take home half that's left over and use that again later in the week to eat, that's amazing. So, yeah, that's my little list. I think we touched on everything. What do you think?
I think that's it. That's like the guidebook on how to reduce food waste. Good bless you, Pepper.
Yeah.
So I think that's it. I think that's the guidebook on how to reduce food waste.
Yeah, I'm sure we could talk about this for like 5 more years.
Hey, I said we'd limit it to an hour, and we're already over that. So sorry, guys. I knew it was going to be over an hour. We tried.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. We really enjoy talking about stuff like this. I hope it's not too boring.
Thank you again to our sponsor, Supercubes. We're big fans, always have been, always will be. And we will see you in 2 weeks for our next episode, which is the last of season 2.
Please remember to vote in favor of people and planet. Next time we talk to you will be post election, and I already have major anxiety.
Same. We are unwell. It's fine.
Thank you so much for listening. We love you guys, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Pepper.
Crushed it.
She's woken from her slumber.
Well, perfect timing.